Now here, someone asked me this week about, this is Shiloh, not in London, this was Shiloh from a different country, about carrying in the park. Go on Shabbos, long Shabbosim, you go for a walk in the park. Are you allowed to carry a child in the park? Are you allowed to take off your jacket and carry it in the park? So, well, obviously we're talking in a case where there's no Eruv. And so here's the question, what is the din of a park? And typically we're talking about a park which has got a fence all around it. So here becomes a shaila, and I want to spend a few minutes on this because it's a very common shaila. And so we have here the term, which we're going to have the word karfif. Karfif, I don't know, perhaps the word would be paddock. It means an area which is, well, we'll learn the halacha and we'll perhaps find the appropriate translation in English. I didn't check up the English translation. So this is in Hilchos Erevin, places which are called mukofim ledira, adjacent to or surrounded with for a dwelling. Kol heker mechitz. And here we have the halacha. You have here a perimeter fence. Sheloi hukaf lediras odom lichniso v'yitzia tomit. It has a perimeter fence, but it's not made for current use, for continual use. In the olden days, you'd have the front of the house was the main usage. The back of the house was more like a junk area. So they had a storage, or a long-term storage. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd go there on a day-to-day basis to get your stuff. You had stuff which you'd keep there. You know, you'd keep your yacht over there, and you'd keep your skis, these things which you only need seasonal. Yeah, the hakarfif. What is a karfif? So who hekav godel lahachnis boy eitzim loitza. The karfif, he defines, it is an enclosure for storing wood. People kept wood for building, people for firewood, but it's not. It wasn't for continual use. It's for longest term storage. It goes on. Gino, a garden. Gino, garden means a vegetable garden. A pardes, an orchard. Hamukofim geder gavoya yudfochim. It does have 10 tfochim high. Now here we have here an area which has got walls around it. It's a valid Rishus HaYochid. However, Chachomim forbade us to carry within there more than Dal Amis, as if it were Rishus HaRabim. It's got walls around it, was willst du? And furthermore, if someone would stand on the street and throw something over the fence into this carpet, this area, he would be chayiv. Sharei mechitzas murasen. So there's no question that is a Rishus HaYochid min HaTorah. Elo shemuchasoren de yurin. The problem is there's no one living there. Harei henke karmelis medivrei seifri. This has got the status of karmelis, which means in Isur it's limited midrabonon. Kiven she'enon asuyin lediro, because it's not made for living there. Mischalfin heim b'rshus harabim imheim hekev godel. Because it's a large enclosure, people will come to confuse this with a public area. And then he says a small one is not. See here? So this is our problem with the parks. You have here a large area. It's a couple of acres, let's say. It's well beyond the shear of Karfif. So Minatoir is Rishus HaYochid, but Midrabon we've got to do in Karfif. And in Karfif you're not allowed to carry more than Dal Dams. So that's our problem. Now, if you have a mansion, and the mansion has got acres of land, that's not a problem, because the acres of land are belonging to. They are hook. That's the term hukaf ledira, and I'm not sure whether the word hukaf means surrounded or adjacent. Either way, but they are the lands of the house. But in a park. So now you might ask, what about if the park has got a cafe? If the park has got a hotel in it, that's easier because then it's used by Yom V'Layla. But if the park doesn't have a hotel, it only has, or not even a park keeper's house, it's just got, let's say, a cafe, which is only by Yom and not by Layla. Usually, most parks in this part of the world are locked. No, I haven't checked. I don't go checking out parks tonight. So then it's not used by Yom or by Layla. So then it's not qualified as a dealer. So that's our problem. Okay. Now, what is the definition? Let's read over the page. Sif Vav, skipping a bit. ואפילו קרפף וכיוצא בה. אם הקיפו מחיצויסו לדירה. If you have a carpet, let's say it's a wood, a storage of wood, but if the fence around it was constructed to be serving a dwelling, then it's considered the grounds of the house, and you're allowed to carry there more than Dal Damas, even if it's more than the Sosayim, and you're allowed to carry from the house to it. A little bit more detail. Now, I'm going to take issue with the one who put in the punctuation in this text, because I think they put the question mark in the wrong place. Mahu hukaf ledira, question mark. What is hukaf ledira? Zoi she'osa boitchila. And now the timing here is important. The timing has to be that the dwelling precedes the fence. And that's an interesting dilemma, because usually you might have thought that you first build a security wall and then you start building inside. That raises a problem, because then that wall preceded the dwelling. That would not be kosher to carry there. I'm going to throw in something. We're learning now in the 3 weeks, we're learning the Beis Abchira. So we learn about the Chil. So the Rosh in Midas, the Rosh has got a Pirush in Midas. He says, why did they make the Chil? Because when they built the Harabayis, they built the perimeter wall before they had the dwellings inside. And therefore you wouldn't be allowed to carry in the Harabayis. So they needed to carry, especially on Erev Pesach Shabbos, they needed to be able to carry Harabayis. So he says the Rosh, they took this large 500 Amma square plot, which had a wall around it, and it wasn't kosher to carry. They cut it across, a wall divided into 2 sections. That makes both parts into hukaf ledira, and they're allowed to carry on Shabbos after that. That's how the Rosh learns. The Rambam doesn't learn that way. The Rambam learns that the chayil, the soilig, was a fence around the Azora, but that's the way the Rosh learns. Anyway, let's come back. So we have to have, so I said the timing is important, that the dwelling has to precede the wall. So how does that work? So he says, you first built a booth, a hut for the guards. And there it's imperative, as I said before, you have to have a guard who's there not only by day, you have to be day and night. Another possibility, you first built the house. You didn't start living in the house yet properly, because it doesn't have a fence around it. But the house is there, and I'm not sure exactly what does it mean he started living not bekviyas. Anyway, that the house was there, so that's what I'm saying, the timing is important, that the dwelling has to have been before the walls were built. Now, as I've said before, mukaf ledira, I translated, could be surrounded. And here we have another type. What happens if you have a house, and then in front of it, or the back of it, doesn't matter, you have a yard which has got 3 fences, like a ches, and it's abutting the house. Is that called mukaf ledira, or does it have to be surrounded by the chotz? So that's what the next point which Alter Rebbe says. Oy afilu posach tchilo pesach bilvad mi beisoy. I'm going to skip the brackets and I'll come back to the brackets. He opened a house, a door from the house. And then, then he has a house, he opened one side, and then he built 3 walls around that open side. So then that's also called mukaf ledira. So it doesn't matter whether the calf is all around or just on one side, that doesn't matter, as long as it's adjacent. Let's go back to that brackets. And now, klal godel, that when the Alter Rebbe puts something in brackets, put your question, start thinking, what's he saying here? What's his dilemma? The Alter Rebbe put something in brackets because he had a dilemma. He felt that was more inclined. The Alter Rebbe's brother says that he put things in, usually it's chidushim, and he wanted to, at a later stage, reflect back and see whether he's still okay with that. So what's this alternative? It doesn't matter whether you open the door, cut out an opening in order to be able to use the land next to your house. It could be there was a door there already, but the main thing is that the door preceded the perimeter fence. Very good. You know what? Let's go a little bit. I'm going to come back to this slide, but this question of parks was addressed in this sefer. Is a sefer called Imre Yoshe from Reb Meir Arik, and he was one of the very prominent poskim in pre-war Europe. I'm not sure exactly when he passed away. I read once that the Reb Meir Arik met the Marsham. Marsham lived in Brezhan. He was Brezhanerov, and he didn't ethnisch gekocht. The Marsham kocht sehr stark in Alter Rebbe. And Reb Meir Arik told the Marsham, you should be learning the Shechinah Harav more. And you'll find, and after that, the next time they met, he said he's finding Kiddushim in the left, right, and center, the Alter Rebbe Shechinah. But Reb Meir Arik kocht sich stark in Alter Rebbe. Let me explain something. It's irrelevant to here. If you have an area, a karfif, which does not have a wall around it, within an Eruv, it would invalidate the Eruv. I'll give you an example. I own a manor. I win the pools and I buy a manor in Kent, yeah? Yeah, so I own a manor. But in my manor, I've got acres of land, and I identify a plot. You know what? I'm going to take this plot. We're going to plant potatoes. So I've got 5 acres of land, but within that, I've got a plot of potatoes. Here, where my potatoes are growing, no walking on my potatoes. Yeah, because you're going to ruin my potatoes. Yeah, and I won't get the prize at the end of the season. So if the area of the potatoes is more than 50 by 100 amas, by 25 by 50 meters, so then not only is that a problem, that has invalidated the whole area. The whole 5 acres they mustn't carry because it's exposed to an area which you can't carry. The only answer is that my plot of potatoes has to have a separate fence to separate it from the rest of the 5 acres. Then I can carry in the rest in the potato patch. I am not allowed to go. I'm saying this for the same reason. Let's say in Edgware you have an Eruv. If somewhere in Edgware, in this 2 square miles which are in the Eruv, I haven't checked it out, I'm just throwing numbers. If somewhere there is within there a plot of potatoes, or corn, whatever it may be, if that is exposed to the rest of the area, not only that would not be allowed to be carried in, it would invalidate the whole area. So when you have such a plot of potatoes or whatever it may be, agricultural plot, within an Eruv area, you have to isolate that area from the rest of the land. Let's move. So this is where the Marsham is dealing with. He had a correspondence. So now I'm going to read now the Marsham. The Gam Yeshloima. The Gan. So now, if a plot of potatoes can invalidate an Eruv, what about a garden? A city garden? A common? Is that also a karfif, perhaps? Perhaps that should invalidate the Eruv. So this is what he's addressing. Don't compare a common, a park, don't compare it to a potato plot. The Gana Natua Be'ir, you have a garden in a city which has got a wall around it, or it's got, one of those pole and wire Eruvin. The town is the dwelling, full of dwellings. When the park is open, is accessible to the rest of the city, so he's saying here that if a park is open to where there are houses, it's the same as if it was the grounds of the manor. of their mansion. That's what he's being mechadish here. So again, you could have argued the taina could be a park. There's no one living there, so it's a karfif. But if that park is part of a bigger Erev, and there are dwellings in the overall Erev, so the park is seen like to be the grounds of those houses. And then he gives a reference to the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, Ishin und Ches Sif Yud. Oy shehoyo Pesach Pasuach Mikvar. He's referring to that bracketed piece. That's what he's referring to. And what he seems to be saying is, it doesn't matter whether the doors were built to access the park. The doors were built to be doors of the houses. But lepoyol, the doors of the houses within the Erev, are providing access from the homes to the park, albeit indirectly. That's okay. That is the way I understand the Pshat in Marsha. Okay? It's not Marsha, I mean Mermei Arik. Now, I've got one little problem. See, he refers to Shin and Ches Sif Yud. Let's go back. That Loshin was in Sif Vav. Such mistakes happen. But now let's take a look at Sif Yud. And that's really a spanner in the works. In Sif Yud, the Alter Rebbe says the following. V'yesh oimrim shekol karfif, the second line. When we've said that the karfif has to be adjacent to a dwelling, there is a shita in Ramah who says that it doesn't have to be mamish physically adjacent, so long as it's b'toichat chum, because it's a reasonable distance. That's called mukif ledira. Hidati olov b'Shabbos. You have in mind, it's right nearby your house. So according to this shita, if I've got a tennis pitch, a tennis pitch, yeah, the right word.
Court. Court.
Tennis. Thank you. Oh, very alt, if you English the other. So now I've got this tennis court just down the road from me. I have in mind, or I have a storage. So because it's nearby, so that's also called sob cook of ladida. That's this shit. Says the Alter Rebbe v'yein ze'ike. That's not okay. As discussed earlier, we talked about you've got this junkyard at the back of the house, which is, if it's more than Beis Osayim, it's a Carmelis. It's mamish nearby. Elomai, it has to be mamish. The Alter Rebbe says, in more in detail, the idea of Hukev Ladira has to have direct access. So now I come back to the park, not in Edgware and not in a place where there's no Erev. So now you have a park. If not for this last line in Sif Yud, I would have said a park is a karfif, but it's the cook of Ladida, because people use it. They think, I'm going to go to the park. It's for human usage. It's not like a potato plant. But the Alter Rebbe says that's not enough. The karfif has to be mamish adjacent to a dwelling. The park is not adjacent to a dwelling. So according to the first shita, you could say a city park, you're allowed to carry that. Because it's called Samach Ladira, Kukev Ladira. It's near the dwellings. But if you pass him that it has to be, the karfif to be Kukev Ladira has to be mamish adjacent, a city park is not adjacent.
Springfield Park has got a house there at the end of Lingwood Road in the park.
If the houses here have an opening to the park, and so they can be construed as grounds of the park, of the house, then that would be a hatter. You're right, but otherwise no. What happened when it came to after Gimel Tammuz, and people started spending a lot of time over Shabbosim also at the oil? So there became a question about carrying in the Beis HaChaim, because the Beis HaChaim was not built as a Hukif Ladira. And the Beis HaChaim is much more than 50 by 100 amas, and so the wall of the Beis HaChaim precedes the Beis Chabad, which is adjacent to the Beis HaChaim. So what's the heter to be allowed to carry there on Shabbos? Now the answer is, if you have a situation where the wall preceded the house, and therefore it's not valid for carrying there, there is a way of dealing with this by dismantling part of the wall, just 10 amas, which invalidates it as a perimeter fence, and then rebuilding that, refencing that area. And so since Gimel Tammuz, there have been renovations to the perimeter fence, and therefore that area is ready. The perimeter fence is later than the dwellings, and therefore you're allowed to carry it. The din of Rishus HaYochid, if it's a single management, a single authority, even though it's owned by many, that would still be a Rishus HaYochid. I am just thinking now of the airport. If you're stuck in the airport on Shabbos, yeah, you have more a question because you've got individual shops, and then you've got the common area. But if it was just like a hospital, which is the NHS, but you're allowed to carry within the hospital because there's a single authority, that wouldn't be a problem. Now we have this question. Someone sent me a question about, because of post-COVID, their sense of smell is lost, and the Tati can't smell the difference between pepper and cinnamon. Well, then, okay. And then one of them cannot smell other things, but he can smell cinnamon. And then they have orange oil. And they use that. It seems to be bought for as a pest deterrent. That looks like some pests don't like orange oil. And Mendel, who can't smell cinnamon, sorry, he can smell cinnamon, but he enjoys the orange oil. Can we make Bayer Minivasomim on the orange oil? So first of all, can you make a Bayer Minivasomim on pepper? Can you make a Bayer Minivasomim on cinnamon? And actually, there's a difference in Shulchan Aruch. In the Alter Rebbe, you have in Perek Yud Aleph of Birchas Hanehenin. On cinnamon, you can make the bracha Bayer Minivasomim on cinnamon and on cloves, although they are also put into food, but they are also to enhance the fragrance of the food as well as the taste. Pepper, by contrast, is for flavor and not for smell, and therefore you wouldn't make a bracha Bayer Minivasomim on pepper. But here we have another issue, that the orange oil, if you have a fragrance, and this is what we're going to read inside, you only make a bracha on a good fragrance if it's made for enjoying the smell. But if it's, let's say, an incense for clothes, to make the clothes should have a nice fragrance, you would not make a bracha on that. Furthermore, ve'ein tzorach loyma, how much more so rather, mugmar, which is made if you'd burn incense to cover up a bad smell, basically a deodorant, potpourri, whatever, which you have the somim, which an istinis, if he goes to the Beis HaKis, he can't stand a bad smell, takes with him a little locket of potpourri. So that would not warrant a bracha Bayer Minivasomim, because it's not to enjoy the smell as much as it is to dispel an unpleasant smell. On that basis, you wouldn't make a bracha on something which is there as a deodorant. And therefore, what I've answered that family, that if any of the family, it does have a sense of smell, they can make the bracha and be motzi the rest of the family, with the smelling as well as with the bracha. But if they don't, if no one has a sense of smell, so you don't say the bracha, that's all.